Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be a book haul. So I think I haven't done one of these since June? Late June maybe? So I've got a whole bunch of books that have accumulated that I haven't shown you. So I mean, yeah, in the thumbnail I was clearly not holding them all up because it would physically be impossible for me to hold these all up. I've got like 60 plus books to show you today, so it's going to be a longer video, so you know, grab a snack or something. Given how fast I read, it's actually not a horrendous amount that I've added to my TBR. I have several like books that I've won in giveaways and, you know, received for free or whatever, so I'll talk about those first, I think, and then we'll go into the books that I've bought for myself. So I think the first book I will talk about I actually received from a review from the author, and that's Monstre Volume 1 by Duncan Swan. So like, look how cool this book is also, just like pretty badass, came with a couple bookmarks, it's also signed. But I think this is like sort of a horror book, and it's like some sort of apocalyptic event. So it's like, you know, day zero, we've got some sort of research facility in Switzerland. There's like a plume of toxic smoke and ash pouring into the sky, and it's created an impenetrable cloud that's slowly smothering the earth in darkness. So some US Marines are sent out on a mission to find out what happened, basically, and how to undo it. Day 89, it's reached the east coast of the US, nowhere to run and no hope of survival. The American people have descended into madness, and basically a Tennessee sheriff is trying to help one of his deputies protect her family, and they're moving west to try to find this old nuclear bunker. So yeah, that sounds awesome and also like kind of terrifying, and I'm curious to see how it'll be, you know, what the reading experience will be like reading this during the pandemic. But it sounds awesome and I've heard pretty good things about it, so I'm excited to get to this. So now we'll go into the books that I won in assorted giveaways, mostly from Goodreads, I think. First one I'll talk about is Ballistic by Richard Kadrey. So this is actually the second to last book in the Sandman Slim series, and I have not read any of them, and of course, you know, I still entered to win, but it's like, it's an urban fantasy series that I've like repeatedly looked at, so I think, you know, it's finally time for me to dive into it. Obviously from the beginning, I'm not going to jump in here, but I had found a lot of them are actually available to borrow from Prime Reading, so that's how I got the first one. I still need to read it, but you know, that's the plan. I have literally no idea what's going on, but there's some sort of battle between warring angels and in some sort of invasion of ghosts. There's some sort of cold case murder that may or may not be relevant. I think we've got a woman who our main character may have saved in a zombie attack, and she's kind of like this adrenaline junkie, and then I guess there's some sort of lodge that attracts thrill seekers that are flocking to perilous events. This lodge may have some sort of connection with a missing angel. I don't know. So yeah, I obviously need to get caught up on this series, but I'm super excited that I have this because I feel like that's kind of a good motivation to jump into this urban fantasy series that I have not read yet. The next book I'll talk about is The Eighth Detective by Pavesi. So this is a thriller, I believe. We have a professor of mathematics who basically wrote out 7 perfect detective stories to demonstrate how there's like rules for murder mysteries. But that was like 30 years ago. There's some sort of editor who like eventually, like years later, knocks on his door and she wants to republish his book. And it's like there's things that don't add up, and consistencies left by this guy that a sharp-eyed editor begins to suspect are more than mistakes. So there's clues and some sort of mystery to actually solve. I have heard more mixed things about this, so I'm kind of nervous about it, but you know, we'll see how it goes. The next book I'll talk about is The Shadow of Kyoshi by F.C. So this is the second book in the series, and I have not read the first, nor have I actually watched all of Avatar, so, you know, yay, good job, self. There's some sort of threat emerging from the spirit world, and Kyoshi goes to the Fire Nation, and there's some sort of game of court politics. The palace itself is attacked, and so everybody's trying to deliver justice before the Fire Nation is consumed by strife. So I've actually read The Epic Crush of Jeannie Lo by this author and really enjoyed it. I've been watching Avatar extremely slowly. I'm still in the first season, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and I definitely want to like be more immersed in this world. The next book I'll talk about is All These Monsters by Amy Tintera. So I think I actually had won this in an Instagram giveaway. So we have 17-year-old Clara who's trying to fight back against her abusive father, and also just like her life and the Scrabs, which are earth-dwelling monsters that the governments are trying to keep from rampaging through cities and towns. So she ends up joining an international fight squad. It's like when she starts training, she learns what fighting scrabs really means: sore muscles, exhaustion, and worst of all, death. They're unpredictable, violent, and terrifying. But she's getting more confidence in her battle skills and realizes that, you know, these monsters may not be the biggest threat, and the true monsters are ones that you least expect. So that sounds awesome. I don't think I've heard anything about this, but I'm excited to try it out. The next book I'll talk about is Savage Legion by Matt Wallace. We've got these savages that the Empire relies on. They're this greatest weapon, I guess. Basically, it's like the people that nobody will miss, and throw them by the thousands at the Empire's enemies. If they live, they fight again. If they die, well, there are always more. So our main character is not a savage. She's a warrior with a mission to find the man she once loved, to find the man who holds the key to exposing the secret of the Savage Legion and ending the mass conscription of these people. But to find him, she has to become one of them and, like, fight in their wars and find her purpose. She'll die a savage if she has to, but not before showing the world who she really is and what the Savage Legion can really do. So that sounds awesome. I feel like I've heard pretty good things about this so far. The next book I'll talk about is Traitor by Amanda McCrina. So I don't actually remember entering this giveaway, but I clearly did. So this is a historical thriller, I think. This is Poland, 1944. This city has remained a battleground between resistance fighters and insurgent armies. Loyalties torn between Poland and Ukraine. So our 17-year-old main character is half Ukrainian and half Polish and has joined the Soviet Red Army to keep himself alive and fed. He ends up shooting his unit's political officer in the street and ends up being rescued by a squad of Ukrainian freedom fighters. It's like they may have saved him, but he doesn't really trust them. He especially doesn't trust the young leader, who has a lot of secrets of his own. There's some sort of betrayal that sends them on the run, and it's like a traitor can be an enemy or a savior or sometimes both. So I've heard really good things about this. The next book I'll talk about is The Paris Library by Janet Skeslien Charles. I have no idea if I pronounced that right. This is another historical fiction book. I think this is, it's like based on the true World War II story of the heroic librarians of the American Library in Paris. This is Paris 1939. We have our main character who's a librarian. The Nazis are marching in to occupy Paris, and it's like she stands to lose everything she holds dear, including her beloved library. So she, along with her fellow librarians, joins the resistance with the best weapons they have, books. So it's like, but when the war finally ends, instead of freedom, she tastes the bitter sting of betrayal. So then we also have another timeline that looks like in Montana, 1983, and we follow a lonely teenager who, I think, is like her interest is piqued by an air of mystery about her solitary elderly neighbor. So she learns more about her neighbor's past. They share a lot of things, but there's some sort of dark secret from the past that connects them. I like that, you know, there's this library aspect to it, and that's probably why I entered this giveaway. So yeah, we shall see how this goes. The next book I'll talk about is Under Scottish Stars by Carla Laureano. So this, I think this is a romance. We have a newly widowed main character who's focusing on her children to the exclusion of her career, her art, and her sanity. She's asked to oversee this guest house on the Isle of Skye. I guess the hotel manager turns out to be irritating, condescending, and incredibly attractive. I bet we can guess what's going to go on there. So this guy gave up his home, his girlfriend, and his career to return to Skye and raise his niece. He's been successfully managing this hotel without the owner's interference until our main character, Serena, shows up, challenging his authority and his conviction that nothing is missing from his new life. There's obviously some sort of spark of attraction, and it's like, will their commitment to family be what draws them together, or what could keep them apart? So I think the last of the giveaways that I won is Float Plan by Trish Dollar. So this comes out next March. I like how bright it is. That is super exciting. So Anna has lost her fiance, and it's like she's been shipwrecked by grief until a reminder goes off about a trip they were supposed to take together. So she ends up going on this trip, and so she goes to sea in their sailboat, intending to do this alone. But it's like after a treacherous night's sail, unsurprisingly, she realizes she can't do it by herself and hires a professional sailor to help. And he has been struggling with a very different future than the one he had planned. Romance rises with the tide, and they discover that it's never too late to chart a new course. So that sounds super cute, and I like that there's like the sailing aspect. I really like anything that has to do with like the ocean. So I'm definitely excited to see how this one goes. So now I have 3 books that I got for free through Penguin's Rewards program. So the first one I'll talk about is Reign of the Fallen by Sarah Glenn Marsh. So this is, this is a YA fantasy, and we follow Odessa, who is a master necromancer, and she's catering to the kingdom's ruling dead. Whenever a noble dies, it's her job to raise them by retrieving their soul from a dreamy and dangerous shadow world called the Deadlands. But there's a cost to this. Basically, like, they have to remain shrouded, and if a hint of flesh is exposed, some sort of, like, awful transformation occurs, and I think they essentially turn into zombies. There's, like, a large increase in these, like, zombie-type attacks. In the necromancer community, one of them, it's like there's a crushing loss of one of their own, and there's some sort of disturbing conspiracy that someone is intentionally creating these shades by tearing shrouds from the dead and training them to attack. So they're, fighting along her fellow mages, and a powerful girl, as enthralling as she is infuriating, they have to untangle the gruesome plot to destroy, this world before, basically, things go to hell. So that sounds awesome. The next book I'll talk about is The House of Whispers by Laura Purcell. So I've read The Silent Companions by her last year and really liked it. This is going to be a gothic horror type book. So it's like consumption has ravaged our main character's family, leaving her and her father alone and heartbroken. But I guess her father has plans for some sort of experiment, so he's convinced that sea air will prove to be the cure that his family needs. He arranges to house a group of prisoners suffering from consumption in the caves beneath his new home. He's got some controversial medical trials going on. I guess our main character's maid has been telling her a whole bunch of strange stories about the fairies that hunt the land, searching for those they can steal away to their realm. And then we have 40 years later, we have another character who arrives at this house to take up a position as a nurse to the now partially paralyzed and mute, I think, other main character. This new character has fled to Cornwall to try to escape her past, and then we've got superstitious staff enacting bizarre rituals, and it's like this new home may be just as dangerous as the last. So I'm super excited for this one. It's, I really enjoy gothic horror, and based on how much I enjoyed The Silent Companions, I'm pretty sure I'm going to really like this one. So yeah, definitely going to pick this up in, either October or November. The last book that I got for free from Penguin's Rewards program is When Jackals Storm the Walls by Beaulieu. So this is the 5th book in the Song of the Shattered Sands series. This is an adult high fantasy series that's more of like this desert setting. So, this one, I talked about it, I think, a few months back, and it was like super hard to try to talk about this without spoilers. So we'll see if I can do it again. We've got like a blood mage kind of controlling things. There's been like a lot of revolution. And basically the premise here is that our main character, Shada, is trying to kill the 12 kings in Sharakai. So we've got this curse that has been broken, but this freedom comes at a great cost. There's like a whole bunch of drama going on with like the gods and goddesses in this world, and basically people are searching for this one goddess in particular. One of our kings is trying to gather the others to basically steer Sharakai away from the destruction he's afraid of. So our main character is basically going to have to make a very tough decision here. So that was maybe not the best summary, but again, hard to do without spoilers. It's the 5th book in the series. I think it's the 6th book series, but I've really enjoyed this series, and if you're looking for like this desert fantasy type book, I would definitely recommend this. So I have a few books that I bought from a library book sale. They usually do like a Friends of the Library sale in person, but obviously you can't do that this year, so they have opened up an online store. And since I want to support my library, I bought a few books. The first one I will talk about is Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this is the 2nd book in the Naturals series, and I read the Naturals, I think, last November or something like that, and really liked it. It's like a YA paranormal crime series, I guess, where you have teenagers with special abilities, and they're basically like trying to solve cold cases, and there's like, a serial killer plot with the first one. Our main character is, again, in this elite FBI program. We've got victims of a brutal new serial killer start turning up, and our naturals are pulled into an active case that strikes too close to home. The killer is a perfect copycat of, I think, the serial killer from the first book. So one of our characters really wants nothing to do with this case, but, the FBI needs him. We've got a supervisor who wants to shut down this naturals program, and then obviously, we've got a whole bunch of teenagers, so there's drama, and there's also these cold cases. I also got the 3rd book in the series, which is All In, again by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So here, I guess there's been a string of brutal murders in Las Vegas. Nice. So the naturals are called in, but the murders are baffling. So this one uses a different method each time. the victims are killed in public, but the killer has not shown up on any security feed. And the victims all have a string of numbers tattooed on their wrist, and there's some sort of code in these numbers. And then we also have this like background mystery with Cassie and her mother, and I think there's been finally been a break in this after years. So yeah, definitely excited for this one as well. And then finally, the last book that I bought in the library from the library is The Dry by Jane Harper. So I've heard Amber from Books of Amber talk about this series and just Jane Harper's writing in general, so that kind of made me more excited to pick this up. But this is a thriller, I think, that takes place in Australia. So we have a federal agent who I think returns home for like a long period of time because he has gotten word that his childhood best friend is dead and his entire family murdered. So then he gets a note that says like, Luke lied, this guy who died, you lied, be at the funeral. So he's swept back into like the secrets of this place and like all these people. There's some sort of really awful drought that's been going on. Long buried mysteries resurface and lots of lies. So it's like sometimes you have to go back home in order to finally leave your past behind. So yeah, I mean, Jane Harper has written several books, I think, in this series. I'm definitely excited to try her books out. So then we can dig into the rest of this large pile of books. I guess we'll just talk about, these are in no particular order. The first one I'll talk about is The Old Guard, Book 1, Opening Fire. So they had just made, Netflix had just made a movie of this, and it's like immortal warriors, essentially. People who can't die. They're soldiers, their war never ends. Basically, for centuries, they've kept their existence hidden, never staying in the one place too long, always moving from mission to mission. Today, the shadows aren't so dark, and they are about to learn that secrets are impossible to keep. So yeah, I really enjoyed the movie and wanted to try out the graphic novels that they're based on. So, you know, our local game store had this, so I was like, you know, I get to support my local store and also see how this goes. On that note, again, from this local game store, I bought Injustice Gods Among Us Year 2, the complete collection, and Injustice Gods Among Us Year 3, the complete collection. So this is basically, I mean, it's like, I think it's supposed to be like a prequel to the video game, but I don't exactly know if that's true. But basically, like, the Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois Lane and kind of like wiping out Metropolis. So it kind of becomes like Superman and people against Batman and some people. I think this Year 2 involves the Green Lantern Corps a bit more, and Year 3 deals with Sinestro and also John Constantine. So that'll be interesting. I enjoyed Year 1, and I've also read some of Injustice 2, so I'm just like bouncing all around with this series, but I'm definitely excited to keep going with it. I do think this is, you know, Year 3 is probably where I'll end, because I've heard less than positive reviews about Years 4 and 5, because I think they switched authors. Next book I'll talk about is The Relentless Moon by Mary Robinette Kowal. So this is the third book in the Lady Astronaut series. Have not read the second one yet, but I've been meaning to. I'll probably read the second and third one fairly soon, because they're definitely ones that I want to get to this year. But this is like an alternate history type series where, if I'm remembering right, some sort of like asteroid or something like wipes out the east coast of the US, and the Earth kind of becomes uninhabitable, so everybody's, you know, like trying to get to space to live. So here, I think we're establishing the lunar colony. Politics on Earth are coming to a boiling point. There's food shortages, riots, sabotage. Basically, people are trying to get off of Earth. I really loved the first one, The Calculating Stars. It's kind of, you know, like hidden figures, but alternate history. So definitely want to continue the series. The next book I'll talk about is Shutter by Courtney Alameda. So this, I had read Pitch Dark some time ago and really liked it and wanted to continue more of her books. So this is maybe horror, urban fantasy. So it's like our main character is one of the last descendants of the Van Helsing lineage. So she's been training since childhood to destroy monsters, both like physical monsters and ghosts, I think. So I think she kills like these ghosts by using a camera. Some sort of routine ghost hunt goes awry, and so our main character and her friends are infected with a curse known as a soul chain. Oh my. As the ghostly sickness spreads through their bodies, she learns that if she doesn't exorcise the entities in 7 days, she and her friends basically die. So she's trying to track down and destroy a nightmare more powerful than anything she's ever faced within a week. So that sounds awesome. The cover is definitely like alarming. So this is definitely one I want to get to again in October and November. The next book I have to talk about is The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the third book in the David Bond trilogy, which I like. I don't know. This is one of my most anticipated books of the year. I still haven't read it yet, possibly because it's like this giant chunker, but hopefully soon. But basically, it's kind of like, it's an adult fantasy series where, you know, we have this sort of like desert setting. Like, it literally, I think the first book starts in Cairo, and then you go to this, like, you know, city of Daevabad where all like jinn and other sort of like other creatures live. We've had a conquest that's happened. Some characters are trying to repair their fraying alliance and stabilize their warring people. Basically, you know, we've got one character who needs to face some ugly truths about their history and kind of deal with some that they considered enemies. We've got other characters who must face difficult choices. Wars are brewing, and you know, our characters have to understand that in order to remake the world, they may need to fight those they once loved and take a stand for those they once hurt. So, I don't know. I mean, I've heard such great things about it. I know I'm going to love it. I just need to actually get to it. The next book I'll talk about is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I think this is a maybe supernatural thriller. I'm not exactly sure. In 1982, upstate New York, one of our characters takes a job as the night clerk at the Sundown Motel, but something's not right at this motel. Something haunting and scary. And then in 2017, we have the niece of this first character who is like trying to figure out what has happened to her aunt who mysteriously disappeared from the Sundown before she was born. This niece ends up moving out and visiting the motel and learns that nothing has changed since 1982, and she finds herself ensnared in the same mysteries that claimed her aunt. So that sounds awesome. I've heard it's like fairly creepy, and this is again one that I'm going to get to in October and November. The next book I have to talk about is Malice by John Gwynne. I know a whole bunch of people who have really loved this series. You know, in particular, Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, I think, was one of the main driving forces for me to finally get this. But this is an adult fantasy, and we have, it looks like, multiple characters here. We've got one who just wants to be a warrior and just like protect and serve. Another character who is sacrificed perhaps too much, and it's like the power to rule will soon be in his grasp and nothing will stop him once he has started. Another character is the newest member of the war band for the High Prince. He's a very skilled swordsman, but has been under the shadow of his older brother. And then our other character, I think, has ideas and lots of plans. Oh, I think it's the High Prince is the other character. Yes. Okay. So he basically I think doesn't agree with his father, the High King's plans. We've got the Banished Lands has a violent past where armies of men and giants clashed in battle, but now giants stir anew, stones weep blood, and there are sightings of giant worms. Ooh. There's signs of a threat far greater than the ancient wars. For if the Black Sun gains ascendancy, mankind's hopes and dreams will fall to dust. Whew, that sounds intense. The next book I'll talk about is Titan Shade by Dan Stout. So this is an urban fantasy that I've seen around a bit. I've been trying to find new urban fantasy series that I haven't somehow already read yet, and this is one of them, and I've heard pretty good things about it. So we have Carter, who is a homicide cop in Titan Shade, which is an oil boom town where 8-tracks are state-of-the-art, disco rules the radio, and all the best sorcerers wear designer labels. But it's a metropolis teetering on the edge of disaster. Basically, like, as the oil reserves are running dry, the future hangs on a possible investment from the reclusive amphibians known as squibs. So I'm assuming maybe this dude? However, a squib diplomat has been horrifically murdered, and there's a lot of pressure to make a quick arrest, even as our main character's investigation leads him into conflict with the city's elite. We've got corrupt co-workers, falsified evidence. Suspects include power-hungry politicians, oil magnates, and mad scientists. So basically, it's like Carter must find the killer before the investigation turns into a witch hunt, and those closest to him pay the ultimate price on it. So yeah, that sounds awesome. The next book I'll talk about is Caged by Ellison Cooper. So I believe this is like a murder mystery. We've got an FBI special agent, and she's offered the chance to work on a high-profile cage killer investigation in Washington, D.C. However, it looks like clues emerge connecting one of the female victims to our main character. So somebody trying to send her a message, has the past come back to haunt her. She's drawn into a web of secrets and lies and comes closer to crossing paths with the killer. And it's like she may be the only one who can crack the case. But basically, she needs to keep herself safe. So I'm excited to try this out. I enjoy, these types of serial killer thriller type books. So we'll see how this goes. Next book I'll talk about is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. So this is my first Joe Hill book, and I'm definitely excited to read it. I'm probably going to read it in November for Kasha's Evil-a-thon, assuming that this fulfills one of the prompts. We have Vic McQueen, who is has an uncanny knack for finding things, but she doesn't really tell anybody about her ability. And then we have Charles Manx, who has a gift of his own. He likes to take children for rides in his 1938 Rolls-Royce race. Rolls-Royce Wraith with the vanity plate Nosferatu. Basically, he can slip out of the everyday world to an astonishing playground of amusements he calls Christmas Land. Across the highway of his twisted imagination, this transforms his precious passengers, leaving them as terrifying and unstoppable as their benefactor. One day, our characters meet. She manages to escape from him, but he won't stop thinking about her and wants to take revenge. So I'm excited to see how this goes. I've heard pretty good things about it. The next book I'll talk about is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. So I mainly picked this up because I know Kat from Brews and Reviews loves it. It's I think a YA contemporary. So we have Eliza, who is shy, weird, and friendless. She's the anonymous creator of the wildly popular webcomic Monstre C. Looks like this guy who's Monstre C's biggest fanfiction writer ends up transferring to her school and draws her into a life offline that she never could have imagined. I guess her secret is eventually shared with the world, and it's everything she's built, her story, her relationship with Wallace, this guy, and even her sanity begins to fall apart. So yeah, I'm super excited to see how this goes. I think this has pretty good anxiety representation from what I remember. The next book I'll talk about is Pivot Point by Casey West. So this, I think, is a YA sci-fi thriller type book. Addison Coleman's life is a big what if. As a searcher, she can essentially look into the future and see both outcomes of a choice, but her parents ambush her with the news that they're divorced, so she's having to pick who she wants to live with. She likes her life as it is, so her answer should be easy, but one search 6 weeks later into the future proves it's not. So she has to choose, I guess, which reality she's willing to live through and which one and who she can't live without. So I've heard pretty good things about this. I've never read anything by Casey West, but I feel like I've heard good things about her as an author. The next book I'll talk about is The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James. Now, I haven't read anything by Lauren James, but with this Space Sirens book club, several people really love her books, so I was like, okay, I'll try something out. This is a YA sci-fi, and it looks like her parents end up dying somehow, and so she's left alone on the Infinity, which is a spaceship speeding away from Earth. She tries to make the best of everything, but she's only able to briefly communicate with her therapist on Earth, and that's the only company she has. She can't help but feel like something is missing. NASA ends up alerting her that another ship is going to be joining her, and so she's exchanging messages with the captain, and they become friends, but she essentially learns that there's more to the captain's mission than she could have imagined, and suddenly there are worse things than being alone. So yeah, definitely excited for this one. The next book I'll talk about is Tiny Pretty Things by Sona Charipotra and Danielle Clayton. So this is a YA contemporary. It's not my usual genre, but it seemed the type of book I wanted to read at the time that I bought it. This takes place at one of Manhattan's most elite ballet schools. We've got our dancers hiding terrible secrets and telling some twisted lies. So we have one character who's flawless, but she's living in the shadow of her ballet star sister. We have a perfectionist character who's tired of being the understudy, and she's she'll settle for nothing but the best, even if she has to resort to some less than perfect means to get there. And then we have a new girl who's already outperforming everybody, but the very act of dancing could kill her. So we've got fierce competition, pranks growing darker. So yeah, this just seems like drama at a ballet school, and it sounds like a lot of fun. So, and I feel like I had seen pretty positive reviews from some of my friends who had read it. The next book I'll talk about is Nights of the Living Dead, which is an anthology edited by Jonathan Maberry and George Romero. This is literally just an anthology about zombie stories set in the 48 hours of the legendary outbreak of Night of the Living Dead. We have a variety of authors here, including Mira Grant, who is Shauna Maguire's pen name. So yeah, definitely excited for this. Again, seems perfect for October or November. I may end up splitting this into 2 book hauls because there's a lot, but we shall see.